Welcome to the webinar, and we have an action-packed agenda for you today, including our keynote speaker, whom I will introduce shortly. Then we will also roll into the panelist discussion and also field any unanswered questions that you didn't have an opportunity to ask during the webinar. And also, before we get started, I have a few housekeeping items to cover. And first, today's webinar will be available on demand after the live session. Next, we'd love to hear from you during today's presentation. And so if you have any questions for our panelists or speakers, please post them in the Zoom Q&A tab, and we will answer them at different intervals throughout the session. And we'll also answer any final questions that you may have at the end of the session as well. And if we don't get to your question during today's webinar, we will also be sure to follow up with you after the webinar. And last, we'd like to encourage you to share today's webinar with your social networks using the hashtag above, DPG Gumbo 2020. So without further ado, I'd like to kick things off by welcoming today's keynote speaker, Steven Umbehocker, founder and CEO of OS Nexus, the leading developer of grid-scale software-defined storage solutions. And Steve is a great guy and friend, and I've had him on the podcast a couple of times now, and he's super sharp. Ladies and gentlemen, he holds over 20 patents, that's 20, in the storage industry alone. And so he's tuned in and he's tapped into the storage and backup and recovery industries. And I'd like to welcome Steven Umbehocker, founder and CEO of OS Nexus, to the virtual stage.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Demetrius. Great to be a part of another one of your events, this virtual event online here, and what a fantastic panel you've assembled here of. Scenarios that we see in the field, and using that as a way to kind of seed a lot of the discussion on what backup looks like today and how that role has evolved over time. All right. Well, to jump right in, one of the biggest backup trends over the last several years is that the data just needs to be online all the time, and machine learning has been a big driver of that. As organizations find out ways to go and really mine that data that they've been backing up and analyze it to go and produce results that can make their businesses more efficient. That's been a big change that's been happening. Demetrius, there we go.
Oh.
Can you jump back to the?
I apologize for that. The slides actually moved on me there.
Yeah.
Is it this one?
Yeah, thanks. Perfect.
All right. There you go.
So yeah, these are three scenarios that are using scale-out NAS storage as a tier, and traditionally backup. You would have your primary storage, and then you'd back things up to tape, and you'd have a backup window where you need to get all the backups done in a certain amount of time. And now with things online all the time, object storage has really stepped in a lot of environments, and it's becoming more and more popular. And so pretty much every backup product on the market today has support for S3 backup storage behind as a tier, so that you can not just back up to NAS or block storage, but you can back up to object storage. Oh, I've got a little pop-up window here. Hold on a sec. There we go. And so, like with microscopy, we're working with several universities that are doing laser scanning. Have these laser scanning microscopes that basically scan cell walls, bring data in terabytes per day, And so those systems are typically designed to use scale out, to use NAS systems. And so scale out's a great way to go and tackle that. But they, one of those universities actually, as soon as that data hits the NAS systems, it's getting shared out with other universities via Globus, and also they're putting a copy of that data up into the cloud. And so that kind of tiering to the cloud has become more and more common. We see it also in the media and entertainment space. We've done several deployments with one of our partners, GTC in Portugal, and they do these media asset management solutions for a lot of football clubs, some of the Premier League football clubs and Champions League football clubs. And they also have moved from a primary tape as a backup destination to object storage in the cloud. So it's going from systems like Delete, where they're doing their media asset management, to scale out NAS, and then up into the cloud. And we're also seeing in video surveillance, like customers using Milestone, XProtect, going to a NAS tier, and then on to like Rubric or other backup tiers behind that. So you can go ahead and jump to the next slide. And so this kind of staging and tiering to object storage is becoming more and more common. Yeah, Demetrius, can you jump to the next slide? And that kind of leads us to one of the other big things that has been a trend, with GDPR compliance coming in and all these other compliance standards that have been formed over the last several years. Backup administrators really have to have a strong understanding of the compliance standards for the industry that they're in. Whether if they're working for a financial company, they really need to have a good handle on the FINRA requirements. For healthcare, there's HIPAA, and for a lot of others, they follow the NIST 800-171 compliance. So there's a lot of backup administrators. Their role has kind of broadened to really have this greater knowledge of these rules and regulations, so that they're doing their backups in compliance with what the laws and regulations require. So some other examples of what we're seeing in the field, financial data being backed up by Commvault, and then that going direct to object storage. So what we see is that when the backup environments are really large, then they are starting to use more and more object storage and private clouds in those environments. And private cloud object storage is typically in the neighborhood of 70 to 80% more cost efficient than going to the public cloud. And so genomics organizations that we work with, they're also big users of private cloud object storage. And then we see, a real common scenario in just so many organizations that are using Veeam for their virtual machine backups. The VMs are being backed up to private cloud object storage, but also kind of a mix of NAS and also block because of the, kind of multiple choices of backup targets there. So yeah, go ahead and jump to the next slide. So yeah, it's my to kind of wrap up kind of the introduction to the call here, or the webinar. The backup administrators are now, is it a role or is it a task? I remember many years ago, the storage administrator, the enterprise storage admin, really became part of just sort of a level of expertise among a group of IT administrators in an organization, but their role got bigger. It's now spans so many other tasks. And I think it's the same thing with backup administration. It kind of depends on which company or organization you're working within, but we find that the backup administrators that we're working with are experts in a lot more areas. Object storage, as we were talking about earlier, is become like a kind of the new standard destination for backups. And but the backup administrator role, includes remote replication activities, a lot in data security, hybrid cloud, multi-cloud, knowing the flows of the data, making sure that those backup windows can be met given the network speeds that are available between those environments, and kind of to the one of the most interesting bits is all the work that happens by backup administrators these days using things like Puppet and Chef and Python and scripting in these environments. So there's a certain element of becoming a software engineer as a backup administrator. You know, if you go back 15 years, how many backup administrators knew how to develop in Python versus today? It's a whole new world. There's so much greater skill set among IT administrators, and I think that really kind of brings us to, you know, what is backup admin 2.0, and it's really kind of an aggregation of all those elements. And Demetrius, I think that's a great image there of the Batman there. I mean, you know, that skill set, that greater skill set that the backup admin 2.0 brings makes an organization much more prepared when, you know, those problems arrive, when data needs to be recovered, when that bat signal goes up. You've got this panel here of great experts great examples of folks that are backup admin 2.0. And so that's a great kind of segue to the panel.
All right, well, Steven, thank you so much for giving us some nice nuggets of details around, you know, where the role is headed, and also a little information about kind of backup admin 2.0. So heading right into the panel discussion, and this is the point that I guess everyone has been waiting for. And all of our panelists are all experts in the backup and recovery industry, and they're going to share their views on the backup and storage administrator role and how the roles are shifting in today's environment. And not only due to COVID-19, but also due to the rise in cybersecurity, backup as code, IT automation, and also some of the emerging application container technologies. And so I'm excited to introduce today's panelists to you today. And first off, we have Alejandro Jaimes.
Right here.
Data protection engineer. Next, we have Yasmin Pamaku, backup administrator.
Hello?
Yeah, if I messed up your last name, I apologize now.
No, it's okay. Tomoko is okay.
All right, thank you. And Christian Peterson.
Hey, everyone.
Technical influence manager. Next up, we have Yuval Avitan, IT engineer. You're still on mute. There you go.
Hey. Thank you.
And last but not least, Michael Kays.
Hey, good morning, everybody.
Field solutions engineer. All right, so I will ask a series of questions, and each panelist will have an opportunity to answer the question based upon their experience, their skill set, and just honestly where they think things are headed, or their own experience with what has happened in the industry, or basically what's going on now. So the first question that I would like to ask the panelists, and I will, let's see, who shall I pick on? Alex.
Right here.
How has the backup and storage administrator role changed from your perspective?
Well, yes. Well, first, hello, everybody around the world. And first of all, just 30 seconds on my background. So I have, I've been data protection engineer for probably 15, 18 years. In my background, Unix, IBM TSM, and recently in the last, I want to say 5 years, 6 years, I've been more into a as the what is it? The environments have changed. I've been getting more into the hyperconverged infrastructure, your tapeless and so forth platforms, and I'm going to elaborate a little bit more in a little bit. So anyway, so that is a little bit my background, so how's the backup admin role change? It's changed in my point of view. It's changed dramatically, almost a 360. I want to say I won't consider it 180, but easily a 360 because it's no longer first of all on the operating system side. It's no longer knowing about your standalone Unix, Windows servers, but it's knowing about your virtual environments. How are you going to back them up, and also what are you going to do with the data, right? As Steven mentioned earlier, the replication side, and then you introduce deduplication, compression, encryption, and so you need to be aware of all those other areas, and besides that, then you have the as you mentioned also the compliance sides and the disaster recovery side. So I've worked with Cohesity. I worked with also the EMC Dell. Now there's Dell EMC data domain systems, and so mostly on the EMC Dell EMC platform, I've done a lot of the database backups, Oracle, SQL. So that's yet another platform that you need to be aware of. How the database environments have changed, right? You have primarily, like I said, the Oracle and SQL databases, and then you have the others, DB2, Sybase, and Informix, and so forth. So to be aware of those environments and how they've been, a lot of them are running on virtual environments, it has become a challenge, and sometimes a challenge to keep up.
And Alejandro, I'm going to jump in here.
Sure.
I have to keep things moving and flowing. I've appreciated, the answer that you've provided. Let me give someone else an opportunity to jump in. Is anyone itching? Anyone else itching to jump in? Okay.
May
go
I
ahead.
answer this question?
Sure. Go ahead.
I also want to answer another question extra. There was a question you asked before. What do we think is the primary challenge with getting companies to respond back to our job application?
So this question is only
yes,
about the storage admin role.
Yes, this is also, I find, related to this.
Okay.
I want to answer this question first. 8 to 10 years ago, actually, backup recovery didn't matter much, not much reliable. Generally, backup investments could easily seem wasted investment, at least in my country. Just get a bunch of cheap disks for backup, or just send the data to old tapes. Because admins thought that they didn't need this data, or they think they couldn't get the backup data when they urgently need, or probably recovery success rates were low, or recoveries were so slow, or backup investments was not cheap. It is still expensive, actually. Actually, there are companies still acting like this, by the way, and they are paying for their approach with ransomware attacks. But for the last years, backup recovery take the importance it deserves. So in here, for a backup admin, easier to find a job these days according to past, at least in Istanbul. But in the future, it will change. We will come to that.
Okay.
So in brief, backup recovery itself is important, and it is indispensable, in my opinion, in future. About the role of backup admin and where to head it. I worked in enterprise environments all these years, so I will talk about it. In enterprise environments with growing data size and production's complexity, backup admin's responsibilities are increased. For backup VM servers, backup admin need to understand virtual environments. Also, big-sized rack Oracle database environments with big-sized availability group SQL servers, which is also replicated to other sites. For example, in my environment, there are SQL servers, SQL server databases, over 100 terabytes, Oracle databases, 400, 500 terabytes. With these challenges, backup admin also works as an architect to determine which data sent to expensive storages and how, which data sent to cheap storages or tape libraries, which ones need to replicate, which ones will be backup or not. For example, in past, we will try to backup enterprise work, but not today anymore. Backup admin need to develop solutions for these challenges, and of course, capacity management need to troubleshoot backup service performance, monitoring, reporting, and so on. As we can see, backup admin has a lot of responsibilities right now. We all know
Yeah, and thank you so much for that, Yasmin. And each person, I'll give you anywhere from maybe two to 3 minutes, so we can really move through the webinar fluidly and get to all of the questions. Is there anyone else that has anything to add quickly on this question before I move on to the next one?
I can add something to this, and basically is that I don't really share that view that the size is any problem at the moment, because there's so many solutions on it to solve it. But basically is that I remember one of my history consultants work, we basically produced petabyte of data in one of the cloud providers, and we're literally backing up basically everything from one cloud to another. And of course, it creates a lot of challenge of bandwidth and everything. And we took over 100 terabytes, more than 100 terabytes per day from one cloud to another. And the interesting enough with that backup and storage challenge is that the whole backup and storage group we were working in was like 3-4 people. And I really saw an issue that they don't want to work anymore with storage, or they don't want to work with backup anymore. So they pushed everything, that the whole group basically get eliminated by a cloud provider. So, and even the backup piece, there's a lot of vendors out there. We already heard a couple of you saying some few names out there, but basically they are just new kids on the block. Basically, if you compare where companies are moving, because companies want to focus on their main corporate and the main work, and IT is just something bad at the moment. And storage and backup admins is even worse. They like to reel it down below basement. And I think the problem is that they pushed everything into the cloud and actually asked the cloud provider to take full responsibility for everything. So that means literally they tried to get eliminating the entire infrastructure people. So this is not only talking backup and storage. I think we're going to see more and more people from an infrastructure side will disappear, basically.
Okay, yeah, definitely. And we have a question in the chat window as well. But before I get to that question, let me move on to the second question here. I'm just trying to be privy of time. All right, so the next question is for any of the panelists, but let's pick on Yuval first here. What skills or certifications are needed to remain relevant?
Yeah, thank you, Demetrius, and hi, everybody. I think as for today, the experience is much more important than certification. It's very important, so therefore need experience with several data protection platforms or storage appliances. At least 3-4 years as a backup or storage admin in large companies. Certification like MCSE, CCNA, NCDA can be an advantage for the experience, of course. I can tell also about myself. I started as a IT admin, very junior, and jump to the data protection and keep going from there. So I learned about other platforms and get more challenges about new stuff.
Okay. So it looks like Satch, I see your question here. So you mentioned business continuity certifications, CBCB. Does anyone, is anybody privy to that certification, or anyone has that? That one, is it on your radar? Because I think it's sort of an older one, right?
Older?
Yeah, it's not a newer certification. It's been around for a while. The business continuity.
Oh, I have FCC and CCNA. That's what I know. And
Okay.
NCDA is just NetApp storage admin.
Yeah,
So,
someone in the chat window had posted a question around business
oh,
continuity
sorry.
certification. Yeah.
Yes, and I think that is I've seen the business continuity certification. I've seen it in not in the backup admin role, but I've seen it too in a separate organization within companies that it's targeting the actual the business continuity of the company. In this case, you have this this person that basically does the due diligence of what is you know the most critical applications, and also he just maps the entire um, uh, disaster recovery. On my previous role, yeah, I was involved in a lot of disaster recovery tests. So you have your project manager slash business continuity role. So it's more of a yeah, getting everybody, all the parties that will need to be involved in case of a disaster. So that's where I've seen that that certification. But yeah, Satch, yeah, definitely it's still it's still it's still out there. Now, with your other question on, I'm going to jump real quick, Dimitri, just 30 seconds on this one. On
Yeah.
I've had experience on the question that that Satch is also asking about the backup products using backing up into, in this case, AWS S3 and so forth. Yeah, I've tested in this Cohesity, and it's an amazing feature, and also the EMC Dell data domain, and it's yeah, it's just basically you migrate either archive or whatever you want to do with your those backups now, and the on the side of in this case for the cost of that, I think it balances, or not balances, but it takes a lot of advantage doing this instead of dealing with tape management, as he mentions. What are the pricing models? So yeah, it from going to the cost of tape and managing everything that all the operation side of things, and also in Iron Mountain or whatever vault that you need to pay for. And so I think it's a great advantage to have the archiving your data into the cloud, into any cloud provider. So that's been my experience.
Okay, great. Anyone else have any skills or certifications that you feel are relevant for a backup or storage administrator to know, to study for, to acquire, to just it has to be something, a part of their skill set moving forward?
I mean, I just want to add one thing there. I think in general, it's really good to study or take certification on the new object storage thinking, to have more overview, because even if you go for, let's say, GCP, AWS, Azure, or whatever, everyone has the same thing basically. But if you know one, I think is good enough to learn the other, so you have a good understanding what is the future look like really.
Yeah, that S3 API has really been standardized across all the different platforms, whether it's public cloud or private cloud. Everything talks S3 as an object storage protocol. Amazon really, was really first to popularize that with the simple S3 protocol. And yeah, it's great that a standard kind of formed so quickly around it. And I think you're right, Christian. Once you have skills with that object storage protocol, then automation of things, whether it's using curl APIs or the AWS CLI utilities or what have you, it all becomes kind of the same, no matter what platform it's talking to at the other end.
I have to agree with Steven. I think for a backup administrator, it's probably most important to have expert level knowledge to whatever's behind the scenes, wherever your target is. And it's also great advice, I think, to have to be well-rounded in the areas of the things that you're backing up. It's so much more effective to know who your customers are and what they're trying to accomplish and something about how they work in order to really be effective and understand what they need and how they maybe want to do it. I mean, I'm sure we've all run into that where different, call it internal customers, maybe DBAs are a typically, I guess, appropriate group to talk about here, where they have their ways of doing things that maybe have gone back many years, and they'd like to fit within that same framework. And if you can make their, call it scripting or whatever methods they want to use, work with what you're doing, it's great for everybody.
Okay, great. Let's move on to the next panel question. All right, the next question is, how is artificial intelligence and machine learning changing the backup environment? And let's see, Christian, let's pick on you.
Sure. I know this is actually one of my favorite topics, actually, Demetrius. Thanks for putting me on lead on this one. But anyway, I think that if you're looking on most backup and storage vendors today, they have some sort of machine learning in background. You just call it, a product name, whatever, to it, so you can ad hook, some sort of SaaS service to it. But if you look on the backup side, they basically already, everyone do like ransomware protection or detection, let's say. That means if too much have been changing during the night, they're expecting ransomware going on in your environment. So that's good. I think machine learning is probably more proper word than AI, but basically is that it can do a lot of help for us to do the backup admin and storage admin's work easier. But I think we just touch it where we're, basic on it. And I think we can do so much more into it. And let's say, I actually think the machine learning can do 80% of a backup admin's work, because 80% of the work is simple stuff like the backup need to restart, or the SQL server hasn't been, running index during meanwhile, so we restart the backup again, 1 hour later, and so on. So I think the machine learning is a big thing for both sides, both storage and backup, and that actually helps us out. So I don't think the backup people or the admin roles should see it as a threat. I think it should see it as a big, really huge compliment and releasing time so you can be more proactive, focus on cost and so on and so on. With that start, I think, I see you, Steve, nodding a lot to it.
Yeah, we that's a big thing that we work on in our product, is to, try to add more and more of those kinds of capabilities to make the life easier for backup administrators. It's just, there's so many things that you're juggling on a day-to-day as an IT admin, and so I think that the cloud providers have kind of set a higher bar for, me coming from the perspective of a storage company. You've got to really make everything as turnkey as possible, because there's every year it's sort of like another task gets added to what, it doesn't matter which role you are in an IT organization, there's more and more being added to your to-do list on a regular basis, and you've got that exponential growth of of data happening at the same time. So it's a super challenging role, but I think it also keeps it interesting. And yeah, people shouldn't really look at the AI machine learning as something that's going to replace that kind of role. I think it's just way too complex in terms of like trying to orchestrate the recovery of a database with the NAS environment, with so many other things. It's like, you know, we don't have general AI today. So it's one of those things where, you know, the more tools that you have at your fingertips to make life easier is better.
There's another thing that, Steve, I noticed that you start writing animation, scripting part of your part of presentation. And I think that is a good thing, because I hear so often backup admin, store admins like, oh, you know, damn it, now I need to do this again. You know, that person, you know, bugger me again about this and this and this and so on. And take that all negative energy to actually say that, okay, let's instead, you know, automate that part or put in machine learning so that can be automated from my perspective. So instead of that person talking to you through Slack and say that, oh, I need more storage, instead of the chatbot comes in and like, hi, you know, what do you want? I need more storage. Perfect. I fix it for you. How much do you need? I need 100 gigabytes. Oh, perfect. And the machine learning goes in, assign 100 gigabytes. There we go. And you haven't done anything, basically. You just automate the whole thing. And I think that is so easy to do it. And there's so many open APIs out there that could be really awesome to do some automation to it. And I think that is a big game changer on the market, actually. I hope machine learning, as soon as possible, part of your role. I think you're going to be the best top-notch person at your work, you know, straight away.
Yeah,
and also let me jump in here. Let's see, we have a couple of questions in the chat window, and I'm not sure if this one has been answered or not, but it's from Namrata. There's a general fear that backup domain is getting obsolete, as managing backups in the cloud is very easy. What are your thoughts?
I think Michael just answered it, and it's
that's answered.
Yeah, that's a great point. What Michael stated there, but I think that question encapsulates everything that this conversation, you know, where what are we covering here? But most definitely, I mean, it sounds like it, as Michael mentioned, it sounds like just the cloud integrations is been making, as he says, making a lot of things, a lot of these platforms easier. But it's in this case, the backup admin role is not all organizations have, you know, that presence on the cloud. And as I mentioned earlier, you have your HCI and you know, your Rubrik, Cohesity, Nutanix, all these platforms, EMC, Dell, and so forth, that they're still migrating archiving data to the cloud. So you need to know for disaster recovery, for immediate recovery, and for compliance reasons, you need to know, you know, where your data is and how you're backing it up and so forth. So it's not that as the fear as mentioned that, yeah, it is going away, the backup admin role. No, it's just evolving, right? And diversifying even more now, more than ever.
Yeah. Oh, do you have one more thing before I move to the next question, Steven?
No, I was just going to say that evolution, I think, you know, folks have been mentioning here, I think it's the compliance and there's some notes in the chat there too about how, you know, the object locking features of object storage. There's like, you know, one of the standard things in the S3 protocol now is that you can say, I want this data bucket to be in governance mode, or I want it to be in compliance mode. And that's a big checkbox for a lot of organizations that need to be compliant to these different legal standards. And so I think that's been one of the big drivers, is that they get to check that box saying, yeah, we're compliant to HIPAA, or we're compliant to FINRA, because this data is immutable. And And I think, you know, kind of looping it back to AI and machine learning, you know, having that data being online, it enables all of these AI and machine learning systems to really, you know, gather new nuggets of valuable information about the organization or the business to make it more efficient. And so I think this is kind of going a little bit off, but there's sort of this, you know, backup and archive are two different activities, but they seem to be merging together. Because that data that's being backed up is really kind of an always online archive these days.
All right. Yeah, that's definitely one that seems to scare some people. You know, watching iRobot and some of these other Hollywood shows definitely, it's not quite like that yet, but I'm not sure we're ever going to get there. Moving on to the next question. This is the final question before we really open it up to all questions, and we just have basically just a general conversation, roundtable. Let's see. I shall pick on Michael Hayes. All right, you ready? Is there a backup storage admin role 2.0 on the horizon, as Steven had mentioned earlier?
Yeah, I think what Steven said kind of foreshadowed any answer to this question, right? And I think kind of all of these points we've talked about before sort of bleed into this one, where just like a lot of roles in IT, where there maybe used to be a lot of very specific silos and, you know, nobody spoke or did anything outside of those silos, now the roles are all blending together. And if not actually performing those roles, the information you need in order to effectively do your job, you cannot be, for instance, a virtualization engineer and not know anything about storage or networking. And the same is true for backup. And we've had some of the questions that relate to cloud, for instance. You can't just be in a, you know, under a rock doing your backups and not know anything about cloud. It's imperative to doing your job. And kind of as we talked about earlier on, you're in effect, you're a security engineer as well. You're a big piece of the security pillar now. Maybe somebody else is setting the policy, but you maybe need to be responsible for bringing them the technologies that can enable their policy and let them know what they can do as far as your CISO is concerned. With AI machine learning, you know, being able to understand that this empowers you to do more things than just check every backup job to make sure that it ran correctly and rerun it, or take tapes out of a robot, right? I mean, these are things that the cloud and AI are enabling and taking away the repetitive nature of the work and letting you kind of help to architect better solutions for your company and bringing things to people who maybe in the past, we'll call it backup. I know a lot of people will call it DR or business continuity, but people who just look at it as backup, as checking a box, now it enables you to be a lot more proactive and really drive some value for your company and being a true, more so than just an insurance policy, and showing people, we touched on archive a second ago, showing people how this huge mountain of data that you're creating can be used for other things. And if you're able to kind of drive the use of that and drive the way that your organization's architecture can make use of those things, it is one way that going back to what you need to remain relevant. I mean, that is definitely a skill that will keep you relevant, and that'll keep you at the forefront and not just be an afterthought of or a cost center for your organization, in my opinion.
All right, that was well said. Wow, you are definitely ready for that one. I need to use that backup 2.0 explanation from you. Also, something else that I'm seeing as well is, you know, a lot of talk about containers, and I don't think anyone really brought it up lately, but if you are a backup admin, storage admin, cloud architect, engineer, whatever the case may be, containers is one thing that's on the horizon. And, you know, Kubernetes and Docker, and learning and understanding more about the application and how the application is becoming the centerpiece of an organization. And so they're moving more into microservices and automation, as we mentioned earlier. But anyone else want to jump in to answer this question? And I think there may be a comment out in the chat. Let's see, Stephen Lawler. In my mind, a backup admin is possibly the wrong terminology. I think a more apt title would be business continuity administrator. The old type backup has long gone. Now a plan for DR and BC is most important. So planning and testing is a massive portion of the job.
I think that
Absolutely.
loops back into the container bit that you're mentioning is that there's all these different disparate pieces and parts that make up the application that all have to be recovered together. And with the containers, you kind of put a nice little security envelope around an application, but there's still a lot of really interesting work there for backup administrators around automating the recovery to bring all those pieces online. I had a discussion with a cloud architect at IBM, and one of the challenges they had was like, hey, they've got the virtual machines replicating from site A to site B with this particular group of customers, but one of their biggest challenges is how you bring the NAS storage along with it. So if you fail over from site A to B, the VMs are there, but where's all their back-end storage? And so you kind of have to orchestrate multiple pieces together. Christian, did you comment on it?
No, I just agree, and especially with Michael's output there, it was like a really great summary of everything.
Yeah.
But I agree, and also is that I just want to add to that a little bit quickly is that I had one customer I met that is going in all in for AI, and the problem they had was they didn't have enough data for AI, and we started talking a little bit over a lunch, and I finally find out that, wait a minute, we have the data, but the owner of the data is the backup. The backup people has the data for it. So the 2.0, I mean, I think the backup and storage admins are putting themselves to dead end, but I think the 2.0 could actually be that we are the Jedi in AI, actually, because we have all the data. No one has the data except the storage and backup admin. And even a backup admin even have historical data that no one else has. And so I think that we should turn around, and even if we don't have it on-prem anymore, we maybe have it in cloud, local cloud, public cloud, whatever you call it. But I think it could be really interesting position where we say that we have the data, we can give it for you, and we help you out with the APIs how to access it. And I got a little bit feeling during this all this conversation is that we go in the same path as data centers did. Basically everyone has their own data center 20 years back. What happened for like a decade was that we sort of centralized everything to local data centers to get big data center owners, and everyone killed their own and outsourced it to a data center, power plant somewhere. And I think we go the same direction with storage and backup admin, basically. That means we maybe not see or can touch the hardware or anything, but we can still help out to design it and make sure we use it in the most efficient way, and also reuse the data in a good sense, actually.
All right, let's before we do that, let's roll into Q&A and just kind of an open roundtable discussion where anything goes.
I also
Yes,
want
I'd
to
like
add
to expand
one
on.
sentence, Demetrius.
Okay.
Hold on one second, Yasmin, go ahead.
A couple of sentences only. I think there won't be a specific backup admin role exist 10 years later at customer sites. Backup admin will remain only in cloud data centers, I guess. I'm trying to say if companies which their main field of activity is not IT, like banks, like insurance companies, they don't have to have their own data centers. They will use the cloud for all their needs. Cold data or hot data, what do they have need? Because with actually 5G technology after that, response times will change dramatically. So maybe 10 years for backup admin roles, I guess.
Okay, Alex, go ahead. Thanks, Yasmin.
Yes, thank you. And that's a great point, Jasmine. So I'd like to expand on Steven's logger on the comment in the chat. But and yes, it's a business continuity admin now, and our data protection is no longer the backup admin, because as we mentioned earlier, it's your backup the data, and I believe someone mentions that Veritas Net Backup has improved, also the way to protect the data. But at the same time, I go back to the disaster recovery side, and just as I've been learning AWS, you have to know CloudFormation. Now you have an automated process and how to recover your infrastructure in the cloud. Well, you recover your infrastructure, but where's your data, right? Where are your database backups or your EC2 instances? Are you gonna replicate them to another region and so forth? So it's still that business continuity. You need to expand on, you having your backups for immediate restore, but again, the business continuity is still important, right? And as you mentioned, Demetrius, now with in the last, I don't know for how many years, 5 years or so, the container side, Dockers, and you have all the Kubernetes, environments have taken off. So that's another area that it's as a backup admin, we need to be aware of, because that is a completely set of skills that one will need to learn.
Yeah, great point. Nelly, is there a question in the Q&A?
Yeah, actually, Steven is asking, or Stefan, I'm sorry, as the gravity shifts from prem to cloud, more often customers are leveraging cloud native apps such as Office 365. How does the panel suggest recovery be done with cloud native apps when you no longer own the management of the app environment? So Microsoft backs up itself. Well, it does and it doesn't. But do you plan to back up the backup?
I can take that one.
Oh,
yeah, I think that's a great question. First of all, so many people that use things like O365 or Salesforce or any of these cloud-based type applications that are becoming so prevalent are under the impression that they're backed up, and they are from a if their data center becomes a crater, they will restore your data. But for something like Office 365, if Bill in accounting deletes 3 weeks worth of emails, they're not going to restore that for you. There's different things you can do on things like talking about that suite like OneDrive or something like that, where you can do version control or anything. But the point being, there isn't really a backup strategy for that, and there are products out there that do that. Many of the typical backup products will have a module that will handle that for you. That can also be done in the cloud. I'd just say that without going into specific products, I guess that there are plenty of commercial products available that will handle that. But it's excellent just to be thinking about that, because that's something that I would say a large portion of the people that I deal with don't realize that at first, and it's something that we have to educate them on.
Can I just add a little bit fun story to that, actually, because I'm European. It means I go under GDPR law. And I still remember when I went over to California to San Francisco and met one of the backup vendors over there. And I signed in to one of these small signing pads, and I did my signature and everything into it. And I felt like a virus into that, because now that iPad was actually infected by GDPR. And I asked the backup provider, can you back up that iPad? And that vendor said, no, we can't. And I said, can you erase me? I don't know. So basically I can sue that backup vendor very, very hard, because they couldn't even protect it or erase me as a person. And I think that's mean also in the cloud world is that it's going up so many things, so many products out there. And it will be never one backup product can protect them all. So I guess you will need to use multiple products, multiple products, or you need to be able to script and make sure you can offload that data from that cloud provider, whatever it is called Office 365, or call it HubSpot, Salesforce, whatever. You need to be able to pull out the data yourself and then make sure you can collect it to your backup vendor, basically. And I mean, that vendor will never develop a backup tool for that iPad, but I can guess that a small consultancy firm somewhere in the world can make $10,000 to create that and sell it to one or two customers around the world, and that's a good profit for that small consultancy firm, basically. So that, I hope that answers your question a little bit. But for the major ones, I think that most vendors will support it anyway, sooner or later, say so.
Yeah, and we're rolling up maybe 1 or 2 or 3 more minutes. I know I started a little late, so I apologize for that. Any closing thoughts or insight around just the overall panel and where you think the backup and storage administrator role is going? I guess any takeaways that anyone wants to mention, any last minute questions that may not have been addressed? Nelly, are there any questions out there?
There's none in the Q&A panel, no.
All right.
I think just to sum up a lot of the discussion there, I think it's an exciting time to be in IT, and I think that given kind of the different responses here, it really has become a task of a greater role to do the backup administration activities, and I think to Christian's point earlier about the backup administrator taking in on that role of like being that person that can go and get the data back from those backups. It's sort of, there's gold in the mine, and the backup administrators have this particularly unique skill set to go and pull all that aggregate information together so that organizations that after they've done sort of their first digital transformation, that they can kind of take their organization to another level by mining information that they've backed up for decades and can restore that to tape and turn that into live data again. So I think I think it's an exciting time, but it is a much bigger role, and I as Michael was mentioning earlier, it's sort of like you're an expert in so many different areas these days in IT, and backup, even if you're the primary hat wearer for the backup administration role, it's a part of something much bigger.
Yeah, and I want to close us out by thanking, first and foremost, Steven Umbehocker for helping out and, being a keynote speaker, and also our panelists. This was a group of people that, I reached out to on my LinkedIn Backup and Recovery Professionals group. Put a question out there, hey, I'm putting on a webinar, and would you like to attend? And these are the ones that actually spoke up and raised their hands. So I really do appreciate each one. So we have representation around the world. And that's the reason why it's so early. So 8 a.m. this time, it's just murder on Steve. He's on the he's on the West Coast. So he had to wake up pretty early in order to do this. But it looks like he had a couple cups of coffee. So he looks rejuvenated, and he did a great job. So yeah, there will be a part 2 in the series, probably next month. And I really want to thank Mike Nelson also for jumping in and handling Q&A. So thank you very much, Nelly. And thank you to our panelists. Until next time, thank you for joining the webinar, and have a fantastic week.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Y'all have a good day.
Thank you.
Stay healthy.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.